Last year, I found out something was growing inside me. Stage 4 endometriosis. I was shocked, but not for the reason you might think. See, this disease affects 1 in 10 women, and it nearly cost me my kidney. But here's what really floored me. The science that could have helped me and millions like me barely exists. Instead, I was told what so many women are told. Just go on birth control. Since when did birth control become this go-to solution for anything that is remotely considered a female problem? Let me put this in perspective. In the last 60 years, researchers conducted 640 studies on menstrual blood, while semen, over 15,000 studies. That's a 23-to-1 research gap. Women make up half the population, yet medicine has systematically failed our reproductive health. Why? I needed answers, so I started digging, and what I uncovered wasn't just negligence, it was something even deeper going on in the system. 3 major medical disasters that effectively pressed pause on women's health research for generations. And understanding this history and the science behind it is key to understanding how we got here and why there is so little women's health research even today.
Every doctor, every hospital, every nurse must be aware that it's most important that they check their medicine cabinet and that they do not take this drug, that they turn it in.
Thalidomide was billed as a quick-fix pregnancy wonder
drug marketed to pregnant women to cure morning
sickness in the 1950s and 60s,
but in reality
poisoned thousands of unborn babies.
The drug thalidomide
caused a lifetime of suffering.
You've probably heard of this morning sickness medication that caused severe birth defects, but the actual chemistry behind why it was so devastating, that is a mind-blowing story most people don't know about.
Thalidomide was widely used in Europe. It was used as a tranquilizer. It was used as a sleeping medication. It was used even to treat nausea and morning sickness.
In 1956, thalidomide hit the market in Germany under the brand name Conturgen. By October of that year, it was available nationwide. Eventually, it made its way toward America, but was thankfully never officially sold here, all thanks to one remarkable woman, Dr. Frances Oldham Kelsey.
And she was one of the few physicians who was employed by the FDA as a reviewer to look at thalidomide as a drug.
In September of 1960, the FDA application for the American version of thalidomide, Kevadon, landed on Dr. Kelsey's desk. It should have been a routine approval, but something in the safety data didn't sit right with her. When she questioned the manufacturer, William S. Merrill, they were furious, complaining to her bosses about being questioned by this petty woman. But Dr. Kelsey's actions were totally warranted because, and get this, the application relied heavily on anecdotal testimony rather than actual clinical data, even claiming that Kevadon has no lethal dose, something no other drug in history can claim. Merrill Company was desperate to get this drug approved. Germans were consuming 1 million doses daily in 1960, and if they could tap into America, the world's largest market, they'd have a blockbuster on their hands. For 19 exhausting months, Dr. Kelsey blocked this drug's approval 4 separate times, while pharmaceutical executives labeled her as a bureaucratic nitpicker. Then, the horrifying reports emerged out of Europe. Thousands of babies dying or born with severe limb deformities across 46 countries. A fate that Dr. Frances Oldham Kelsey ensured did not repeat in America. Her steadfastness saved so many lives. Dr. Kelsey's persistence revealed 2 game-changing discoveries that transformed medicine forever. First, that a drug taken by mouth could actually cross through to the baby and cause harm, something doctors didn't know before. And second, she exposed the huge importance of something called chirality. This is absolutely fascinating. Sometimes molecules can exist in two forms that are mirror images of each other. Think about your hands. They're mirror images, but you can't perfectly stack them on top of each other. The same thing happens with some medicine molecules. But before thalidomide, scientists didn't realize that these different handed versions could have dramatically different effects in the body. In thalidomide's case, one version helped with morning sickness, while the mirror version caused serious birth defects by stopping blood vessels from forming properly in developing babies. So why not just give pregnant women the safe version? Here's where the science gets wild. Thalidomide can flip back and forth between both versions inside your body. So even if you only took the safe version, it could transform into the harmful version while inside your bloodstream. So really, the only protection was to avoid thalidomide entirely. But this was just the first in a trio of medical events that would derail women's reproductive health research for decades to come. Just when trust in women's health was starting to rebuild, another well-meaning idea would spiral into one of the worst pharmaceutical mistakes of the 20th century. This leads us to disaster number 2. Undoubtedly, one of the most painful experiences an expecting couple can go through is the miscarriage. So back in the 1940s, researchers tried to come up with a solution. They had a reasonable hypothesis. Maybe miscarriages were caused by insufficient estrogen. The solution was something called diethylstilbestrol, or DES, and is the second installment in this unholy trinity. Without proper clinical testing, a synthetic estrogen called DES was aggressively marketed to pregnant women as this miracle solution. But here's what's truly mind-boggling. The drug continued to be marketed and prescribed for 30 years, despite a 1953 study showing it simply did not work. Then in 1971, researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital discovered something alarming. Young women between 15 and 22 years old were developing a rare form of vaginal cancer called clear cell adenocarcinoma. The common thread? Their mothers had taken DES during pregnancy. These DES daughters experienced a whole host of horrible reproductive issues, including the rare vaginal cancer that led to the initial discovery. But it wasn't just daughters. DES sons faced increased testicular abnormalities and higher cancer rates. There were even cases of DES grandchildren, creating the first ever documented case of a drug causing transgenerational harm. What makes the DES story particularly heartbreaking? It was completely preventable. But the story doesn't end there. While doctors were still reeling from the generational damage of DES, the Dalkon Shield IUD entered the chat. Because one reproductive health disaster wasn't enough for one decade.
This important health warning is for women still using the Dalkon Shield, an IUD birth control device obtained in the early to mid-1970s. There is substantial medical opinion that continued use of the Dalkon Shield may pose a serious personal health hazard and it should be removed.
We definitely can't talk about disasters in women's reproductive health and not talk about IUDs. This is the Dalkon Shield, the first commercially available IUD that came on the market in the early 1970s. The name sounds like a superhero, but I can guarantee you it was anything but. What made the Dalkon Shield so distinctive and ultimately dangerous was this multi-filament string. Unlike other IUDs with a single solid monofilament string, the Dalkon Shield string had multiple threads inside a sheath, kind of like a tiny cable wire. These small spaces between threads create perfect channels for bacteria to travel from the vagina directly into the normal sterile uterus. This is an actual photo of bacteria caught in the Dalkon Shield string. It was also difficult to insert correctly. I mean, look at that design. It looks like a medieval torture device. With that unusual shape, there were many cases of incorrect placement, leading to IUD failures, infections, and unintended pregnancies. Like many women's health products back then, it was rushed to market with minimal testing. So as women began using the device, serious problems quickly emerged.
Women had infections, women had severe pelvic infections that resulted in really severe sepsis, death for some women. Women died from pelvic infection with IUDs. It also wasn't a very good contraceptive. It had a much higher failure rate than today's IUDs do.
There is also dangerous misinformation suggesting the IUD didn't need to be removed during pregnancy. Spoiler alert, it absolutely did. As a result, more than a dozen women died after miscarrying with a Dalkon Shield still in place.
Dalkon Shield was a terrible, terrible IUD. No one defends it. So, gave IUDs all a bad name. There was a time in the 80s when there were no IUDs.
Today, IUDs are considered Class 3 medical devices by the FDA. That is the highest risk category alongside pacemakers and deep brain stimulation devices. This has led to a very safe but very short list of FDA-approved IUDs. But women's birth control options, especially IUDs, are so far from perfect. Let's talk about the modern IUD experience. The number of horror stories you hear about the jaw-dropping pain while getting an IUD inserted or taken out has become so common, it's practically a shared cultural experience.
Oh, it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. We need to be honest with women. We need to listen to women. And that is one of the things I think that women physicians have brought to medicine and to OBGYN in particular.
And if you're not in the know, here's what typically happens. The doctor's standard line is that the IUD insertion or removal will be a little uncomfortable but not painful. The medical understatement of the century. There is a clear and known gap between what patients are told to expect and what many actually experience while getting an IUD. And proper pain management is a problem. Local anesthetics, sedatives, or other pain management options absolutely exist and are available, but only if you already know to ask for them. The reality, many women experience pain so intense they can barely walk afterward, let alone drive themselves home. And this isn't just anecdotal. Duke University researchers analyzed the top 100 TikToks with the hashtag IUD and found that the overwhelming majority weren't celebrating this convenient form of birth control, they were documenting the pain and the side effects. When your medical procedure is going viral for all the wrong reasons, something is clearly off. So why is it so painful when you get an IUD or any kind of cervical biopsy? The science explains it perfectly. It's not just in your head, it's in your nerves. And not just one set of nerves, but 3. Your cervix sits at this junction where 3 major nerve pathways converge, making it one of the most neurologically sensitive areas in your entire body. Think of it like Grand Central Station, but for pain signals. First, you've got the pelvic splanchnic nerves. These are responsible for those deep, visceral cramps that make you want to curl up into a ball. Then there's the hypogastric plexus. When these nerves fire, you feel pain radiating to your lower back and thighs. This network is directly connected to your fight or flight response, when your body literally thinks it's in danger. And finally, the pudendal nerve delivers those sharp, localized ouch moments that make you flinch. When all 3 of these nerve pathways activate simultaneously, which is exactly what happens during cervical procedures, your body experiences this perfect storm of all these different pain signals at the same time. Understanding this triple nerve junction is key to understanding why only one type of pain management may not be enough to cover all 3 pathways. The science is clear. This pain is real and it deserves real solutions. Ladies, comment below if you've had an unforgettable IUD experience. But a bigger question here is, why has birth control historically only been targeted towards women when it takes 2 to tango? When is medicine going to come up with a proper birth control for men? Well, it looks like we won't have to wait that much longer, because this is the first implantable non-hormonal male contraceptive. The contraceptive called Adam is a reversible alternative to condoms and vasectomies. It's a 10-minute outpatient procedure using local anesthetic. Yes, they get anesthetic. Contraline is calling it the male IUD in the sense that it's reversible, but in reality, it's nothing like an actual IUD.
And one fact I know about that clinical trial, when they announced it to recruit participants, there were so many men putting their hands up, it crashed the website. So like men are interested.
The clinical trial results are still awaiting peer review, so let's see what the science world has to say on this. But initial reactions from experts in the field are excited to see a male contraceptive that could actually work and, more importantly, has the potential to become mainstream. So there you have it, thalidomide, DES, and the Dalkon Shield, 3 medical disasters that pressed pause on women's reproductive health, creating a system where protecting women from harm meant excluding them from research entirely. By excluding women from clinical trials, we created new risks, from medications that weren't designed with us in mind, to not knowing how serious diseases like heart attacks present in the female population. The truth is, women being left out of clinical trials was mostly a safety precaution. No one wanted to harm pregnant women or their unborn babies after the disasters we just explored. But there was another reason that researchers don't talk about as much: convenience. When you design a clinical study, you want to limit variables, and women
are more complicated. They have cycles and hormones, and well, men have hormones too. They don't have monthly cycles in the same way.
And it wasn't just human females being left out. Even female lab animals weren't part of the research equation.
They often in the studies, they try to unfemale their female participants. So it's like, right, okay, so we're letting women in, but they do have these pesky hormones. So I think we'll either only test them in the first few days of the cycle when hormones are zero, but not zero, but like really low, to kind of control for that, or we will, flatline hormones with hormonal birth control. And they do it in animals as well. So it's not just, women, like, because even the animal studies obviously have female hormones.
And this led to the reference man, a 25 to 30-year-old white male weighing 70 kilograms who became the standard human model for virtually all medical research. Reference man's supposed superpower: being able to represent humanity as a whole. Spoiler alert, he doesn't.
Women were considered small men. So everything we learn about men could be applied to women. They're just smaller versions.
But that's how NIH research worked for decades. This led and continues to lead to harmful misdiagnoses and medications that weren't made with women in mind. A lot of people don't realize this, but women were not allowed back into clinical trials until 1993. And that was thanks to women like Dr. Florence Hasseltine and Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, who rolled up their sleeves and got to work. They fought to write a new law that required the NIH to include women in clinical trials, but they didn't stop there. Their law also mandated inclusion of racially diverse groups, recognizing that systemic racism was as much a factor in clinical trial design as sexism.
We're here today for the signing of S1, the National Institute of Health Reorganization Revitalization Act of 1993, and to especially recognize the bipartisan coalition which made this bill possible.
That was progress, but there's still a long way to go.
Alzheimer's, as you probably know. So men get Alzheimer's too. So it's not a huge skew, but there definitely is, like, it's much more female prevalent. And not just because women live longer, like there's something going on with the female brain that is more prone to particularly the Alzheimer's type of dementia. So, and this is one of the more shocking examples, if I've got this right, like there are years, like piles of studies looking at only male mice in terms of Alzheimer's research, so that's one of the inexcusable ones. And I get it, but like to study a primarily female condition in male animals really doesn't make any sense. Like that shouldn't have happened.
If you're into listening to podcasts with experts like Dr. Lara Briden, you will love this. Picture this: you're walking down the street when someone calls out to you. You start to say hello when it hits you. You have no idea who they are. Sound familiar? Lots of people struggle with recognizing faces, a condition called prosopagnosia. One of them is best-selling author and revisionist history podcast host Malcolm Gladwell. His producer Lucy is a board-certified super recognizer, something less than 2% of the population can claim. What's really going on or isn't going on in our brains when we see someone we know? Listen to Revisionist History, available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast to find out. Just this March, the New England Journal of Medicine confirmed what many women suspected for years, that bacterial vaginosis, or BV, is sexually transmitted. This matters. BV affects 1 in 3 women and is linked to miscarriage, premature birth, and fertility issues. It's notoriously recurrent, especially after sex, yet researchers didn't classify it as a sexually transmitted disease for decades. But this new Australian study could change that. They studied heterosexual couples where the woman had BV. In one group, both partners were treated with oral and topical antimicrobials. In the other group, only the women were treated. Listen to this. The results were so clear that treating both partners dramatically reduced recurrence that researchers stopped the trial early so everyone could receive the more effective care. This is what happens when medicine only sees half the picture. I mean, think about that wild statistic I shared earlier. 15,000 scientific articles on semen versus only 640 on menstrual fluid. That's not just an oversight, that's a deliberate blind spot. And it affects real people. Right now, about 800 million people are menstruating. That's more than the entire population of North America. Every month, 26% of humans experience something science has barely bothered to understand. Just think about that for a moment. If there's one myth you could debunk around women's health, what would it be?
That ovulation is optional. We've talked about this a lot, but that our ovarian hormones are optional is a myth. It seems crazy to have to say this out loud, but women we benefit from our own hormones. And the only way to make hormones is to have a regular, natural ovulatory cycle. And if you really kind of sit with that for a minute and think about what's happened, it's quite sad. And sometimes I not unusual that I would start crying a little bit at this point of the interview, because I'm just I can't believe that we've switched off the hormones of so many women for so long. And for anyone listening who's in that boat and has had that happen to them, I do also want to say, because I know it can be kind of devastating to think about it. I've worked with a lot of women too. The body is resilient and it can recover. And so, there's always things to be done. And in my perimenopause book, I talk about, it's almost never too late. Get off the pill, cycle while you can, get a couple years of natural cycling, under your belt, build up that metabolic reserve from those beneficial hormones. And yeah.
What if what we've been taught to hide and be ashamed of, our period blood, actually contains critical information that could revolutionize women's health? I did not expect my reporting to become personal, but last November, while on vacation, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. And by April, I was in surgery where doctors found stage 4 disease. So I went to Long Island to visit the ROSE Study Lab. That stands for Research Outsmarts Endometriosis. And what they showed me changed everything I thought I knew about menstruation. They are developing the world's first non-invasive diagnostic test for endometriosis using period blood. And now I'm enrolled in their study. As someone who used to work in healthcare, I was floored. How is it possible we know so little about a disease that affects 1 in 10 women? And why is the default solution just birth control? This isn't just my story. It's the story of millions who have been dismissed, disbelieved, and delayed proper care. In our next episode, I'm taking you inside the lab where this breakthrough is happening. You'll see exactly how scientists are transforming what society taught us to hide into potentially life-saving medical data. This is bigger than one disease or one test. It's about reimagining how we approach half of humanity's healthcare. If you or someone you love has ever been told, it's just cramps, it's normal, when something more serious was happening, hit subscribe and turn on notifications now, because what you learn in our next episode might just change your life. or even save it. I'll see you next time.